Hello and welcome to Property Question Time with me, Gemma Forte. This is the show where you get to ask your property-based questions to a trio of expert panellists. So today, let me introduce you to who we've got on the lineup. We've got James Jenkins, who is a financial advisor at Money Sprite. Welcome along. And then we've got Mr. Paul Higgs, CEO of the Millbank Group and with years and years of property experience. And last but not least, Garett O'Hanlon, Director of MAP Chartered Surveyors. Welcome, gentlemen. Nice to see you all. I'm going to kick off straight away with a question because that's what we're all about. So first one to you, James. Someone has written in to say they've got a bit of a small dilemma, which they hope you can advise on. So 20 years ago, they bought a house jointly with their parents, and they still live there, and this person lives elsewhere. A couple of weeks ago, they went to the solicitor with the paperwork to gift their share of the house to their parents so that they can buy a house of their own. I viewed a house yesterday, which would be ideal. I want to make an offer, but I need a 90% loan-to-value mortgage. And my bank advised me they would view me as a first-time buyer once the transfer goes through. I'm going to speak to the solicitor tomorrow to see where we are with the transfer. She told me it wouldn't take long, as there's no money involved. But my question is, can I make an offer and start the mortgage process in the meantime?
Yes.
Okay.
There we go.
There we go. That's it. Right, moving on.
Finished. Next. Okay, so there's more elements to the question that probably need to be asked. Which do they have a mortgage on the current property, for example? Mm-hmm. If they do, then more than likely, or what likely is going to happen is the mortgage lender on the purchase is going to want that out of their name and the property gone into the parent's name, mortgage gone, so they're buying without a mortgage in place elsewhere. Okay. If that mortgage doesn't have a debt on it at the moment, then actually there's nothing to stop them getting a 90% mortgage on a different property without that property being transferred. So it can go through, the purchase can go through before the transfer does. Mm-hmm. The only downside to that, of course, is they'll be buying a second property, which will then look at the 3% surcharge on stamp duty. So as they are, if there's no mortgage on that property right now, the answer to the question is yes, they can go ahead, they can apply for a mortgage, they can move forward, and they can complete. But obviously, if they complete before they've transferred off, then there will be a surcharge on the stamp duty. Okay, all right, thank you. Very good answer there. The concise one, just yes. Yes. And then there's one with more detail.
A little question on that.
Yes, please do, Garrett.
If they transfer their share over to the parents, is there a potential capital gains situation for the parents?
Potentially, but that would be something they'd need to talk to a tax specialist about, just to clarify exactly where they stand, because there's plenty more questions about when they bought it and so on and so forth, how much they've made and what they spent on it, etc. So yeah, that would be something to talk to a tax specialist about. But in terms of the answer to the question,
bearing in mind,
definitely something to look into when they're transferring it. Absolutely.
Okay. All right, thank you. Right, Paul, I've got one for you. This person says, I've recently been toying with the idea of buying land and building a house on it. I've renovated 2 houses myself, and at this stage, it's part pipe dream, part serious. But I've just done a search on Zoopla and found a plot of land that has planning permission, and it seems ridiculously cheap. I'm wondering if that's normal or there's some common catches to look out for. The plots are in South Wales, it's quite cheap anyway, but still has some lovely homes. They're 0.2 acres and are due to go to auction with a guide price of $4,000. Am I missing something?
So I may have mentioned before, I particularly do not like buying things on the market anyway, and I particularly do not like buying things with planning. So there's because they're always expensive. Okay, things on the market are expensive. From a proper developer's point of view, buying things on the market or in the market is not very clever. I appreciate these people are not really developers; they're just thinking about potentially building their own home and what have you. So, in terms of the specifics of the question, yeah, look, there's all sorts of things that could be going on that are not obvious.
Because it does sound cheap, doesn't it?
Well, it doesn't. It doesn't. I mean, I don't know the market there, so I've no real idea of values. But you know, there are numerous things that could be going on that could mean something is effectively worse than worthless.
Like sewage plant underneath it.
Well, South Wales is obviously a big mining area, so it could be on top of a coal mine. So as you can imagine, it would take quite a lot of concrete to fill one of those up. So development is something that people shouldn't get into. Easily without fully checking things out. It's a super risky business. reason you can potentially make a lot of money in it is because it's high risk, high reward.
Okay.
So there's a long list of things that could be wrong with something, and generally.
So if it's on cheap, there's a reason.
Well, usually if things look too good to be true, there's usually a reason, you know.
So there you go. We've burst that
But
bubble.
who knows? who knows? You know, now and then, you know, obviously deals do exist.
Yeah.
Most of the time, you've got to create them, though. You've got to do something. They don't sort of just happen.
Yeah.
Definitely need to be checked out properly.
Yeah, I always think I'm a bit like this person. I've always thought it'd be an amazing thing to do, but it's just really stressful.
At £4,000, you're not risking too much, are you?
Not really.
So I think you could probably just float that boat and see where you go with it, really.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll just check it out. No such thing as a free lunch. Not that it's free. Okay, Garrett, moving on to you. This question is from someone regarding conveyancing and the solicitor. So their survey was completed some time back, and when it arrived, they sent a copy to their solicitor. He didn't acknowledge it, and when the issue of the heating being graded 3 was raised on the telephone, he said, I'd have to sort that out with the agent. There were also several aspects graded 2. What level of guidance would a solicitor normally provide following receipt of the home buyer's report?
I think probably the same level of guidance that the surveyor would issue for the legal elements of the purchase. In other words, it's horses for courses. I've got some sympathy with the solicitor in that people do present them with these survey reports and ask for their advice. They've never seen the property and they're not technically qualified.
Right.
So I think if you really want advice on the survey, go back to your surveyor. And I think I probably said in an earlier programme that if you want advice about your teeth, don't go to a cardiologist, and the same applies still. So it is a tricky one because I think a lot of people don't approach their surveyor to talk about these reports. They go to the agent, they go to the solicitor, and they should be going to the surveyor. You know, that's what we're there for. The definitions in those home buyers reports are very limited, just 1, 2 and 3. I think personally that causes some issues because surveyors are frightened to grade anything too high, so they tend to drift into the problem areas. And I think, and I'll elicit some views from our colleagues here in a moment, but I think outside of the surveying profession, there are lots of people who don't view those very fine 1, 2, 3 definitions as the best way to serve the public.
Right.
And I think, you know, this probably could be an example of that.
Okay. All right. Just because I can't remember, 3 is bad, yeah? 1 is good, 2 is...
Kind of in between,
and then 3 is a worry, cause for concern.
I mean, I've always felt, you know, 1 to 10 is how we define everything in this country. That's how you do your schoolwork, and everything runs on from that. Everybody understands 1 to 10. And I'm not ever so keen on 1, 2, 3, even though it's my professional institution that have produced this document. But I do find feedback from other people outside the profession, they're not very keen on it either, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Right, have you got a quick nugget for us, by the way?
Yes, I can produce a nugget.
Go on then.
I was going to talk about underpinning because this is a word that frightens people a lot. If you are about to, or you viewed a property and you find out it's been underpinned, or during the course of a survey.
Oh, to me that sounds like the house is going to fall down.
Well, it can be that because essentially, you know, we would all like our houses to be built on granite and not on jelly and ice cream, and underpinning implies the latter. There are degrees of movement which are acceptable in any property, and that will vary according to the age of the property as well. You know, a 15th century timber framed house will accept a lot more distortion than you would in a much more modern property. Underpinning isn't necessarily something which should stop you from buying a property. It may be that it's already been investigated, there's an ongoing situation that you could take through into a purchase. You would need to take advice from your surveyor about continuing insurance cover and making sure that claim carries through to you. If a property has been underpinned, you would like to know why it was underpinned, because there are lots of reasons why that could occur. Has it been partially underpinned? Is there a risk of further movement occurring? What's left after the underpinning? Is there distortion which is going to have impact on the way you can use the property? My experience has been that once a property has been underpinned, usually about 50% of people will be happy to still purchase on the basis it's stronger than it was before.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And 50% will say, I don't really fancy that because it's been underpinned. So
Right,
you
that's
reduce your market. You could potentially restrict your insurance implications or possibilities because insurance companies are less keen, in my experience, on underpinned properties. So it's not to be avoided, but it's to be very carefully investigated
Yeah.
professionally.
And yet do it if you really need to.
Yeah, I've lived in an underpinned property and it was fine. But,
Was it?
But
Yeah.
I think things have changed now. There were lots of properties underpinned in the sort of the 70s and 80s that wouldn't be underpinned now. So
Okay.
it's a different style of things now.
Okay. Would that word put you off buying something?
Personally, I would probably think second time, because I look more on the insurance side of things where I deal with, and the issues we have when clients are buying underpinned properties. We can get mortgages on them, that's not a problem at all. You get the structural engineers reports, and as long as they confirm it's all been done properly and it's all structurally sound, no problem. The biggest issue is the home insurance.
Right.
Now, usually speaking, the current owner, the person who had it underpinned at the time, their insurance company would have paid out to get the underpinning done, and that insurance company is obliged then to reinsure the property for a purchaser.
Okay.
But obviously you're obliged then to what that insurer charges. And if you're not acceptable to that insurer, then you've got a bit of a problem. Other companies who you're going to go to that aren't that original insurer that are going to insure, you're talking quite big premiums. So it's worth, if you're looking at buying an underpinned property, try and get to the bottom of what the insurance situation is first before you get too far down the line.
That's good advice.
All right. Thank you very much. Right, that's it for part one. It's flown by. So there's a short break now, and then join myself and Paul and James and Garrett for part two. Welcome back to Property Question Time with me, Gemma Forte, and my guests, James Jenkins, Paul Higgs, and Garett O'Hanlon. Okay, we're going to kick off this part with a golden nugget, and I'm looking at you, Paul Higgs. What would you like to tell me?
I'm going to talk to you about chipping.
Chipping.
Chipping. Just before the break, some of us here were talking about estate agents, some of which have a habit of valuing high in the hope of getting the instruction. And then next thing you know, the thing probably hasn't sold for months and months and months. And they come back and say, "Oh, we're really sorry, market's changed. Let's lower the price." Okay.
Yes.
There's a similar thing that happens in the development world, and it will be useful for people selling land to know. And that's chipping. There are lots of developers that will basically offer high, on the basis that they've either got their figures wrong, so they don't really, they've got the price wrong, or they know that it's the wrong price, but they have every intention of reducing the price afterwards, i.e. chipping away at the price and bringing it down once they've got rid of the competition, So it's, I mean, from a, just as if you were an estate agent that values honestly, you're going to get peed off with the agents that go in high and get the instruction. From a developer's point of view, it drives me round the bend when you know that people are offering high, you know that they're never going to perform and do the deal, but of course the landowners get sucked into wanting to believe the high price, and the deal most of the time ends up not happening. And the
so
price
that's
comes
frustrating for them. So then basically everybody else has gone off because they've gone, oh, that's gone, I'm not paying that. And then they're stuck, and then they say, actually, we're going to pay X.
Exactly. So
don't the sellers at that point go, we'll shove off then?
Well, sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But sometimes they might have been so sucked into the transaction that they're sort of stuck with it. So the important thing is, if you're a landowner potentially doing a deal with a developer, check their figures, check their track record, make sure they're for real, because there are a lot of wannabe developers out there that either haven't got very good intentions, or maybe they have got good intentions but don't actually know what they're doing. So, like everything, check people out before you decide to deal with them. Okay,
that's really good. I've never heard of that before, and I think that's very interesting. Something to look out for. Right, James, I have a question for you, please. So this person says they're just in the process of buying a first house as a couple. However, their partner's been bankrupt in the past, so for obvious reasons couldn't get a mortgage. Therefore, this person's getting the mortgage in their name only. They've got it in principle, but didn't have enough funds for the deposit and all the fees. So their partner transferred $4,500 for the deposit. And they've just got a letter from the solicitors, and there's a question about the deposit. Is it gifted, etc.? We've got to move out in 4 weeks of our current place, and I don't want any delays. What's the best thing to do here?
Well, the best thing is to be honest. tell the solicitor exactly what it is. The solicitor's got a job to do under money laundering regulations to establish the source of funds and where that deposit's coming from,
Right.
and they have to report that to the mortgage lender. It's their obligation.
So what would be their suspicion, that they've got it from?
It's not so much suspicion, that's just there's anti-money laundering regulations and that's what you've got to do. And they need to report to the mortgage lender where that money's coming from, because has the client borrowed it, is there repayments on it, etc.
So they just say it's from my partner.
So it's from my partner. Now there are a couple of issues on that potentially.
Right.
The mortgage lender, when you apply for it, needs to know that someone is gifting you deposit and who that person is. Now, lenders will sometimes have issues with non-family members, and it sounds like their partner's not married, so they may have an issue over it being a non-family member gifting deposit. The other thing is, what's a big problem for a lot of lenders is if the person giving the deposit is going to actually live in the property. Because one of the big things they say is they've got to be gifting the money and not have any future financial interest in the property or future interest in the property.
And of course they are.
By living it, they're going to have an interest in it.
Yeah.
That's not to say you can't do that. The way I would probably suggest they look at things, if they're saying it's deposit and fund and fees that they're short of, and they've got the money for the deposit, she's got the money for the deposit side of things, if the partner's using the money to pay for fees, that's not something then that needs to be worried about quite so much from the mortgage lender's point of view, because the deposit is coming from her own funds. So he can help out with the solicitor's fees, the stamp duty, etc.
Right.
As long as that's enough to cover it and she's got the deposit elsewhere, if they want to try and make sure that they meet their time frames.
Got you.
The absolute key thing to do though is to be honest with the solicitor. Don't try and be clever with it or try and say it's from somewhere else that it isn't, because that will only A, waste you more time, and B, potentially get you down the line and it still go wrong. So it's be very honest with the solicitor and tell them exactly where it is, and most solicitors will say, well actually, why don't you use that for fees?
Yeah, got you. I mean, there's things like interest-free credit cards that you can do as well. I'm probably not supposed to recommend things like that, but you know, if in that particular situation, that
again,
might...
if it's anything other than your own fees for a deposit, the mortgage lender needs to know.
Oh,
so,
they would still want to know, where's that £5,000 come from?
Where's it come from? And purely, predominantly for the mortgage lender, is there an issue around affordability
they
that's
just
going
want
to
to know
change?
if you can afford to pay off your mortgage.
So some lenders are quite happy if you want to take a personal loan for your deposit, as long as you can afford it.
Got you.
So, yeah.
Can I ask you, how far would they take this business about you having another interest in the property? So in other words, if it's a family member who contributes to that deposit, but potentially they could be in the will?
Good question. They don't go that far. They view it as, are you going to have an interest in the property going forward? So they're looking at, are you going to be living there? Is the person going to be paying you back or paying you any rent, I guess? Or they're looking for a direct interest really, rather than do you have a will where it names them as a potential beneficiary if you die?
Just a lot fussier than they used to be.
Yeah, the big one is deposit funds. And so actually my wife's a solicitor who does conveyancing.
This is handy.
It's very handy for us. But obviously there's a lot of situations with money laundering where actually the clients have got money coming in from family, but obviously they've got to get bank statements from the family members to confirm that their money came from a legitimate source, and it sort of goes on and on and on until everybody's satisfied that is clean money, and everything has to be reported back to the lender if there's any money coming in from or even your money.
This is why moving house is the most stressful thing you can do apart from divorce. So, Paul, let's ask you a question now. This person's recently inherited half of a property that's got development potential. They want to know what to do next. It's a large bungalow in about an acre of land. Estate agents have valued it at about $340 with no planning permission. Prior to this, they've never owned a home or even saved a small deposit for a mortgage, so they've got no experience, okay? But if everything goes well, this property and selling it could set her up, him or her, I'm not sure who it is actually. We hope to use our shares to buy our own homes mortgage free. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity and I'd love to get some advice.
Yeah, okay, so I suspect that 340 valuation doesn't reflect any development potential. So of course they could just sell it for 340 and walk away and they've got 340, very nice. But it obviously could be worth a lot more. So, they don't want to miss out on that if it does exist. So the best thing to do there would be to find an estate agent that's experienced in land and new homes. So not just a run-of-the-mill exchange estate agent. And get them to perhaps put it on the market and offer it, talked about with the development potential, and perhaps talk about doing a subject to planning deal.
Okay.
So someone with experience will come along, and hopefully a number of people with experience will come along and make them offers that reflect the development potential, and it will be then their value to go away and their job to go away and realise the development potential.
Okay.
Yeah,
all
so
right.
basically sell it subject to planning.
Okay, that sounds like really good advice.
Am I right in thinking you can put sort of overrides in it almost, that if they get planning at a later date, you can agree a percentage payoff later for that?
You can. It's called overage. One of the problems with these things is you can be a bit too greedy. So by trying to be a bit too greedy early on, you actually put off potential buyers. So as I say, my view would be to offer it with an experienced agent that knows how to deal with developers, subject to planning.
Okay,
Can
great stuff.
I would be inclined to get 2 or 3 agents involved as well, because we sometimes see things which are clearly being massively sold underpriced for all kinds of reasons. So I think the more you get, especially if you're very inexperienced, the more you can spread your wings, the better. And I think the other piece of advice is look up, because you'll see some vultures circling overhead, so be careful.
Yeah, I'd certainly say two agents. I wouldn't say 2 or 3. If you got 2 or 3 agents, then they'll all be peed off and they won't really put any proper effort into it. I think 2 agents isn't unreasonable, and create a little bit of competition.
Okay, excellent. Right, Garrett, this is a surveyor's dream, this question. We had our RICS building survey done on a prospective purchase. Loads of issues came up, okay? It suggested further investigations on drainage, stability of a garage. We carried out these investigations, and then those revealed cracked drainage, dangerous structural condition of garage that needs to be replaced. And when we placed our offer, we considered that the garage repair would cost around £3,000, as there was no apparent signs of instability. But in fact, a new similar garage would cost 12 grand, and the structural engineers confirmed it's a safety hazard and must be replaced. So I'm now thinking of requesting the sellers to fix the drain cracking or give us an allowance of around 3,000, which is 25% cost of the garage replacement. I won't be requesting for anything else. The property's in South London. Do you think this is a reasonable approach?
How many questions do you want to roll into one there?
I think basically they're saying, can they get some money off because of the structural survey, which I think is completely reasonable, isn't it?
It's completely and utterly reasonable. There's a few other issues come into that as well. If you've got defective drainage, that's going to impact on other things. Potentially, it sounds like maybe it's impacted on the garage. You need to get a precise costing as to what that's going to be, and then it's unlikely you'll get the full cost of that off your purchase, because people don't work in that way. They'll make a contribution towards it. I'm never in favour of allowing vendors to undertake repairs that you then own the property afterwards, because you've no idea if they're going to do it properly, and whoever did it, there's no comeback by you against them because they didn't do it for you in the first place. In terms of the garage, if the engineer is saying that it needs to be pulled down, then it sounds like that's the case. Again, you need to correct the drainage, and maybe there might be a situation where the ground needs to be stabilised for a while before you can re-erect another garage. Depending what's happened to the ground because of the drainage will determine what the foundations for the new garage might need to be. It may not be as simple. So there's a lot of issues there.
Could be a bit of a money pit. I mean, personally, I'd think, I've paid for this survey, it's told me this information, do I still want the house enough to go through it all? So.
Well, it's quite rare, less than 1 in 1,000, I would say, that I say to people, don't buy that.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Very, very, very rare, because everybody's got their own situation, what they're prepared to do, how much they're prepared to take on, and all the rest of it. But the biggest problem is how certain can you be about those costings and about what needs to be done.
Sure. Okay.
I think this actually ties in quite nicely to my point about chipping.
Yeah.
I think the point is, if and when someone offers on a property, whether it be just a normal house or a development property, if there's something that they could and should have been aware of, then that sensibly should be reflected in their price. If there isn't, and something comes to light afterwards, then it's not unreasonable that the price is reduced accordingly.
Yeah.
And as Garrett says, it could be at the end of the day it's a negotiation. But if I discover 10 grand's of work that need doing that I didn't know about, then I wouldn't. I'd want to be starting getting 10 grand off.
Absolutely.
The other important thing is whether or not it's affecting, if they're buying with a mortgage, the actual mortgage valuation of the property.
Right.
If there's a lender's retention, because actually how they play it with the work, if it's conditional work or if it has to, what has to be done, what value the mortgage lender's putting on it. Because potentially an allowance on completion would be sort of what you would look to do, say, leave us the money. but mortgage lenders can have problems with that as well. So make sure anything you're talking about with how you're going to potentially try and get this work done, that you're running it past your solicitor so they can check it with the mortgage lender as well, so that you don't run off agreeing one course of action that sounds lovely because the estate agent suggested it.
Yeah.
Check it out with the solicitor as well and make sure it's not going to affect your mortgage application, because quite a lot of them will do.
Yeah.
And the
Err
other-
on the side of caution.
So I was going to say, the other thing to bear in mind is increasingly nowadays, the mortgage company will not send anybody out to that property at all.
Right.
So nobody will be aware about this defective garage and drainage unless you get your own surveyor in there.
Okie dokie. Thank you, all of you, for chipping in on that one. See what I did there?
Hey.
James, we've got time for a very, very quick golden nugget, like the quickest one we've ever done.
Okay, right, I'll be as quick as I can. It was predominantly about just being prepared for your mortgage appointments. That was it.
Okay.
A lot of clients we see, when they want to see us for a mortgage appointment,
Yeah.
they will sort of turn up and say, right, what can we borrow? And you say, have you got your pay slips? No.
Right,
What's your
yeah.
credit history looking like? But I don't know, I haven't checked it. And it can mean that the conversation you and I have about your mortgage is very woolly.
Limited.
Doesn't really give you any information. So
Yeah.
what I would say is, if you're thinking about buying a property in the coming weeks, months, make sure you've got 3 months pay slips and you take that along. If you're self-employed, especially if you're self-employed, make sure you've got last 2 years trading accounts with you, or your last 2 years tax return, so we can work out what your income's going to be. And a really, really good one is to print off your credit file. Go to Experian, Equifax, copy your credit file, take that along with you as well. While you may not think you've got any issues, you probably haven't. It gives the advisor something they can see. They've got a rough idea, and it saves wasting an awful lot of time with trying maybe credit searches that wouldn't work otherwise. So be prepared.
Very good nugget. I was that person. Take your passport as well. They even want to scan that.
And your passport, and make sure they're the right
True.
names.
Yeah, and get your hair done. It all helps. All right, thank you so much. That's it for this episode of Property Question Time. But thank you so much for watching. And if you've got any questions you'd like answered, please email us info@property-tv.co.uk or go to our website and have a look. All the W's.property-tv.co.uk. I'm Gemma Forte, and this has been James Jenkins, Paul Higgs, and Garett O'Hanlon.